And the second part is about improving coverage to the Rubyvale area, which has been sourced directly in response to the petition received. And those costs are identified at approximately $10,000 excluding GST. So on looking at the outstanding works, there is I suppose some scope in the budget to absorb some of that cost. It wasn't our intention to do either of these two projects when the budget was adopted. However, for the likely benefit of those two projects, we would consider that the Rubyvale improvements would probably be preferable to the additional channels at the Willows transmission site. So primarily that involves increasing the mast height at the Sapphire transmission site at Freedom Road and mounting some new antennas onto that to transmit. So the additional height gives us a benefit with the topography of the land. It allows the signal to actually get into Rubyvale and deal with some vegetation and some topography issues there. Basically, there's some shadow issues, I suppose, that apply to Rubyvale where the signal can't get where it needs to go. So the additional couple of metres of height should help to address that. We have requested coverage maps be provided by ENCOM, our contractors. Unfortunately, they've had some issues with their modelling and they're still running those models at present. And they expect there will be a few hours before they'll actually have the coverage maps completed. But those coverage maps, once they become available, I'll circulate that to councillors so that you're aware of potential benefits there or potential coverage issues. In conclusion, if there's no questions, I suppose our recommendation would be that council does support an additional budget allocation of $10,000 to enable us to provide this improved service to Rubyvale. The benefits, I suppose, are primarily felt by the community. It is at a cost to council, but the benefits relate to improved services for residents in terms of livability. They gain greater access to the, if you like, mainstream digital TV services. There are also likely benefits to the tourism industry primarily, essentially around length of stay in the caravan park and other facilities in that area. On that basis, we are recommending the approval of as I said, an additional $10,000 to fund that particular project, which would be to raise the mast height at Sapphire and install some new antennas.
Through the Chair, Luke, if we do this upgrade to Rubyvale, would that remove the need for VAST, like for us to continue to support VAST?
For the coverage area in and around Rubyvale, yes, it should. And the coverage maps that I'm waiting for should be able to prove what benefit of the area there would be. So there would still be some areas of the gem fields and surrounding areas where the VAST would still need to be used because of local constraints, but this would certainly address a fairly large shadowed area or black spot area for TV transmission at the levels.
Can you refresh my memory of how much the VAST retransmission costs us per annum?
The VAST retransmission doesn't cost us anything, but it costs the resident. So for every set top box that's required for the VAST system, there's a cost of around $280, I think, per installation. So if someone had 2 or 3 TVs, it's basically a multiplier of that amount.
Okay.
And the lifespan of those devices is currently around 2 to 3 years.
Okay, great, thank you.
So with the 3 years, Chair, with the amount of extended panel, it's not likely to be a situation where someone's going to come back and say, well, we're in now, and 5 or 6 other, I suppose, users are outside. Is there no more advantage by going up a few panels, or is that's the maximum? Is that the optimum?
The advice we've received from NCOM is to provide coverage over Ruby Vale, gaining 2 metres of height at the Sapphire transmission site will cover that area. The other option that we have been investigating, but we haven't yet concluded, is whether or not it's possible to put an antenna on the NBN tower at Ruby Vale. But at this point in time, we haven't had any agreement to even investigate putting some extra infrastructure on that facility. So those are the 2 options that we're trying to cost. The preliminary advice from NCOM is that it would be far cheaper to use an existing installation than create a brand new one.
Because I think Mark Driscoll said to you down at the beginning that they've actually got permission to get on the NBN tower. Yes.
Any other questions?
Probably just, I suppose, through the chair, we've got to be careful too that we don't create a longer term problem, I suppose, and maybe the short term upgrade goes ahead, which looks like it will. At the same time, we should be talking to the community about the day that will come, which will be no retransmission and all provided by the government through fast. And that's really where we need to be headed, I think. So maybe it's just a communication so that the communities and the businesses aren't always relying on council as a solution for television. But I certainly support the recommendation. I think it's the right way to go. It's just that reinforcing that dialogue regarding what might happen in the future.
Just through the chair, we can take that to the CRG to see. Okay. Okay, would someone like to move a motion?
Well, Charlie, just on that, you've got 4 options there, Luke. You're looking at option number 1 of the 4, I'm assuming?
Number 2.
Number 2. Yes, just doing the Ruby.
Just doing Ruby Vale.
Yes, through the chair, at this stage, Ruby Vale is the most cost-effective solution, probably benefits the greatest number of people. While we're not broadcasting Channel 10 and Channel 7 out of the Willows retransmission site, we actually haven't received any complaints or requests for additional service from that area in the past couple of years that I'm aware of. So based on the public views, I suppose Ruby Vale would be the priority area.
Rightio, number 2 is.
The other thing to be aware of through the chair is there's some quite sophisticated and economical gadgetry that the great nomads public use now, and you literally just press a couple of buttons and tune into a satellite and get your television. And that was one of the big arguments for why council should retransmit, because the travelling public miss out, but that's not really the case. So this technology is very important here. And I would say that those places that we've just mentioned, where tourism is a big part of what they do, I'd say that that just is testimony that most of the travelling public will probably either don't want to watch telly, or if they do, they've got their own solution, their own mobile solution.
Okay.
I'll have to do that, Mr. Chair.
Move carried.
Option 2.
Option 2.
Expand the coverage to
Second.
service Rubyville.
Carl. Councillor Goodman-Smith. All those in favour? You voting, Megan? Or?
Yeah, I haven't had that.
Okay, I'm just checking. Wasn't too sure. Making sure, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, moving on to e-kidney services.
Thank you, Chair. I think there was a recent CRG meeting, I think, where the members were present because there was some discussion about the e-kidney solution. This matter was first raised back in the end of July, and from there I made contact with the State Department. Megan Killer, the manager of Early Years Innovation Program Services, Early Childhood and Community Engagement. So it's a decent enough title. And I spoke to her about what the council were chasing, some information about the e-kidney proposal, which had been first discussed with the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Daniels. Also contact had been made via me through Zoe and Alicia Dunn and their relations to my wife as well, so I've mentioned that. So the report's covered there, Mr. Chair, on page 18. I've got comments back from Megan Killer as well. I know the Deputy Mayor was at Bohemia and spoke to some representatives there about a possible self-funding model as well, and I've covered that. But the comments basically are saying, Mr. Chair, if the council wish to consider to go down an eKindy path and assist the schools in providing this type of service, then it will be at our cost. And it was estimated at around $14,000 because it's delivered by a third-party facilitator. I'm recommending that council probably not look at supporting the eKindy proposal and look at the self-funding model that's been suggested at some CRGs and that the Deputy Mayor mentioned as well.
Was that 14,000, that was just for
Wages, yeah.
That's just for
One person.
eKindy. We've got no budget allocation for any eKindies, so.
And if we fund, do the chair.
One, be two and three.
That's right, because we
We've got
have
to be-
had a number of requests for mentions of eKindy through the other CRGs. Through the chair, has anyone that any of the councils that have attended the Duringa CRG mentioned the self-funding model to Duringa? Or do you?
I don't know who you attend, do you attend?
Our
Councillor
council,
McIntyre.
sorry, council.
And also Council Rolf has funded to one as well, I'm not sure if it's come up.
Say again, sorry,
Council Rolf's attended one,
Yes.
yeah, I don't know, but it's come up.
I did get a meeting.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It wasn't mentioned, it was mentioned at last meeting that I attended. It has been mentioned as, not as a self-funded model, which was a question.
Yes, yeah, thanks.
And I think, Chair, that's what Zoe basically said as well too. So, but I think it's a good option. It's a good alternative, and we can certainly support any of the groups or the schools that are interested in the self-funding model. But I'm very cautious about the council getting involved with delivering this type of service.
And
I think through the chair too, if we can point to the successful model, the community that's a can-do community, and that shows other communities that the solution could be within our own community, not necessarily the council. So I think that was the idea about talking about it positively. Maybe there could be just a little briefing note that each CRG can be aware of so that they can talk about it. Because it will come up, I think, at a lot of the CRG meetings. So just to have a couple of paragraphs explaining that successful model, and then people can either run with it or not.
Just so you know, I don't think that can-do communities quite got that up and running.
Can-do
So I think.
Can-do community.
We might-
Successful model.
Which is the
don't have
can-do?
that successful model to actually showcase it, but that was a whole idea. It was a selling point to encourage a self-funding
That's
model
great.
so that they could be a showcase community.
We'll hold a briefing note at this stage.
Just hold a briefing note.
Well-
the other point is that even if you have a kindy available in your town, you are self-funded. Like there's a charge, unless you are on a healthcare card or some kind of benefit. A lot of parents are paying,
To go to kindy.
to go to kindy. I'm aware of a cost of 7.5 hour day of $31 per day, is the cost to the parent.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions?
No.
Someone like to move a motion?
To support the.
Or to not support.
Thank you.
Not to, well, I'm
Yeah.
asking for a motion.
To recommend a motion to not support.
Okay,
I'll move the recommended motion.
and seconder? Gary Hayes. Okay, all those in favour? Against? None. Unanimous. just in mentioning, we are now live with live stream. So, okay. So moving on, the RADF and Central Highlands Arts and Cultural Advisory Committee.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've just got Janice and Karen come down and present this report. Again, this is to try and again put a little bit more governance around our arts and cultural function here. I did undertake some research back in the last time the council resolved on the 12th of April to agree to absorb the Chakaka. How do you pronounce it? Chakaka, or whatever it is. But anyway, Mr. Chairman, we've decided to bring this back for committee's consideration because it does serve a purpose in arts and cultural an advisory capacity. Plus, it also has some involvement with the assessing applications under the Regional Arts Development Fund. But I'll hand over to Janice and Karen, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, thank you.
In its current format, the advisory committee is quite heavy with emerald members, and it's our suggestion that we spill the whole committee as it stands and renew it similar to the community grants model that every 2 years they re-elect. So currently, I think we have 7 members based from Emerald. So it's meant to be a regional organisation, and there is some regional other aspects in there, but we have a lot of arts and cultural groups within Rolleston and Whitewater and the heritage groups in Duringa, so they find that it's quite difficult to attend those meetings. So we're going to also go to a new meeting model that at our quarterly rate of meetings, which are the requirement of the state government, we will be having those meetings in Emerald, Scrimshaw, Duringa and Pella. Well, Duringa Blackwater alternative, I think, because of the heritage aspect there. So we will, the new model, we're going to have the quarterly meetings held in one of each of the former centres, dependent on what might be the priority at the time. Heritage is a strong priority, and the arts and cultural strategy will be coming forward next week, but
No, next committee meeting.
next strategy meeting?
No, next
committee?
communities meeting.
Next communities meeting. Okay, so the arts and cultural strategy will be coming forward with the strong focus by communities on heritage. There is also a draft heritage strategy being developed, so that regionally that is the strongest aspect that we get back from communities, and it needs a proper management plan behind it. So reinstating this committee is also an aspect of helping to develop that and to get that community input from the regional centres. So it's just my recommendation that we reform it and go under a new format. And there is current draft guidelines there, which you would have seen, and we may be remodelling those draft guidelines to include going to the 4 regional centres and the 4 locations for the quarterly meetings, and to have the 2-year term. So it's my recommendation that we reinstate the committee to meet legislation requirements too for the rating program.
So it's probably written there somewhere through you, Mr. Chair. How many committee members will there be, Karen?
Well, there's up to 12.
Up to
12 available. It's currently written into the guidelines that council staff can be invited into the meeting, dependent on projects or things that may be coming forward at that time.
Mr. Chair, that's a fairly big committee. So we might need to look at maybe reducing the numbers there. What, up to 12?
It's up to 12, but we currently have 2 council representatives included in that, plus myself and others. So there's 9 others. We've left the aspect that 2 in each former region. So that was where it came from, plus the one which was the Emerald Gallery representative at the time. So that's how those numbers came about. So there was a bit of a formula behind the process.
Mr. Chair, I think for some coordination sake, I think the Deputy Mayor and yourself probably would be good reps from us, particularly the Deputy Mayor, which you could tie in with the other process we're going to be talking about, and that's the CRG money and others, and so there's some coordination go, you could provide to both of those. And yourself maybe as chair of this group, that's all that's all we need to. The most, it's a small fund, and you probably got about 20 grand.
It is a small fund.
20 grand every quarter or something you release, you release it in quarter?
Roughly about 20 each quarter. State government allocated 33 this year, so they're expecting councils to put more of their own support into the program. And we do try and leverage other funding against the rate of funding if we can, because there's a component for strategic initiatives from council.
So the potential current through the chair is that it could grow.
Oh, it could grow.
Yeah.
It could grow, and yes, with leverage funding,
Yep.
it would actually work well with the COTs as well. So.
I just think for coordination, so it could it'd come to better for the deputy mayor and chair of the committee.
I'm happy with that. I'm pretty sure that council, I think some will express a strong interest in the enrollment. That's a bit hard to speak on her behalf when she's not here, but
Well,
I know she has expressed an interest to maintain.
Through the chair, we can take on board Councillor Bell's recommendation and advice there, and perhaps leave it for the first meeting to identify the chair, and go from there.
Probably getting ahead of ourselves, but first we need to agree to establish it, so
Sure.
can we have a motion to re-establish it first? Okay, Megan, Councillor Andrews, Councillor Bell. So all those in favour? Unanimous. And can we have a recommendation?
Yeah, I'll recommend that we appoint council government speak from the phone to the committee. I'm just taking into consideration the points made in regards to the size of the committee, and I just think it's critical to have those public representatives from both arts and heritage, two from each group, two of our former regions at least. So that certainly does make it a bit tricky, but it allows for the ability to rotate. We will lose a few as you go to different regions. I think that the 12,
No, while the numbers seem large, there's never been anyone in full attendance, so it allows the capacity to at least have someone attending.
Flexibility.
Yeah, a bit of flexibility because it's a whole of region committee.
and Mr. Chair, just to back to you, to the CEO, is that the minutes of these meetings are up then to come to our meetings here, because I just think it's going to be great feedback for us on where things are going. And yeah, I'd hope that, that we're able to see the minutes back to here at least, and then not the general meeting, but.
Yeah, if I can respond through the chair, Councillor Bell, I think that there is merit in that. And thinking back to not long after this election term commenced, we did seek to rationalise a lot of our smaller committees through establishing the 3 standing committees. And I think that has been successful. What's occurred since then is the re-establishment of a lot of these little groups. And I think from a governance perspective, if they can report back through the relevant standing committees, not just report back, but have access, whether it be through a delegation if necessary to talk to particular issues. At the very least, there should be either minutes or meeting notes that come to the committee so that they're aware of what's happening with all these groups. So it's a good idea, and as noted, most of the little groups that we sought to rationalise have been recreated, so it's all back to the way it was. But I think where the opportunity for improvement is to coordinate a lot more through a governance approach to having that parent standing committee oversee how they're performing and endorsing their recommendations where appropriate. And There is actually some work being done on amending our governance framework to describe how it should work, and that'll come before council in the not too distant future. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, there's also a current application for ratification through this committee because the current committee wasn't endorsed. I've just asked that it come to this community standing committee.
Yeah.
To endorse.
So that's the next report.
Yeah, no, it's
But is it
it's
in
an
this
extra
one?
report.
It's a great.
So, Mr. Chair, we're just saying that with this one here with the Deputy Mayor and the Chairman, that's moved by Councillor Bell. Is that all? I certainly take on board the Deputy Mayor's comments about Councillor Nixon not being present today, but also having a strong interest in it. But, so we'll discuss that at the first meeting.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, what we've got so far is we've got a mover, there's not a seconder, but what we've got is that CHRC recommends that its Deputy Mayor be the Chairman of the Central Highlands Arts and Cultural Advisory Committee.
So if we've got a seconder?
I'll second that.
Seconder, Councillor Hayes. Is everyone happy? Okay, all those in favour? Unanimous? Okay.
It's on page 74, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next is the RADF 1617 round one application. Okay, so through you, Brad.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that was what Karen was alluding to a little bit before about just with the changeover of the roles. So I'll just ask her to present that. Thanks.
Through the chair, this is just round one RADF application. The committee, while not formally endorsed, did meet, and there was 2 RADF applications put forward. One did not fall into the criteria at all. It was behind the funding dates, and it was also, the budget was very obscure in its presentation, so it just didn't fit within the guidelines. However, this application here for the Central Highlands Writers Group did fit within the RADF guidelines, and it was a recommendation by them that I bring forward to this meeting, seek that it be ratified so they could go ahead with this workshop up in Capella. Capella and Emerald it actually is in.
Is there any questions? No questions? So we just need a motion?
Yep.
I'll move it.
So,
Second.
Councillor Norwood Smith, Councillor Daniels.
all those in favour? Carried, unanimous.
Where's council able to attend these groups?
Beg your pardon?
Are we as councils able to attend these groups if we're members of the committee?
There's no reason you can't be.
Absolutely.
It's actually in the guidelines that anyone from council may be invited in. So in the current draft guidelines, you're quite welcome to attend.
Just got to make sure we get plenty of notification.
Yeah, just as long, yeah, I'll get the notice out and notice.
Gareth, I think if you see one come up about doodling, like at council meetings, doodling, I do lots of horses and stuff, I just can't get it right yet. So I'd like to see.
I'm sure we can have doodling workshop.
Yeah, doodling workshop.
Adult colour again.
There's that.
Oh, there's some great artwork here with the stable, whatever it goes to.
I haven't seen any of it.
Goes to the bin. Anyway, I'm sure that.
I look forward to your.
Okay,
Thanks,
moving
Gareth,
on.
thank you.
Okay, the open space and recreational plan and the Emerald Botanical Gardens.
Yep.
Through Brad.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I suppose this is the first of a number of information reports that the team intend to bring to the Communities Committee. And I suppose they all link into our overall review of our open space and rec plan for all of Central Highlands, but a number of other critical master plans that have been developed to identify our open space and recreational assets. Jamie and Mark are involved. They've sort of worked together as a team to consider this proposal they've brought today, mainly as an adjunct to moving towards our livability strategy as well. We discussed that previously at the last council meeting, but we're also looking at just doing a number of small projects that will certainly add up to the larger livability project. So today's meeting is just giving a bit of an information to the committee about looking at developing the working groups, getting some strategies in place, and working and with ongoing reports back to community. So I'll just hand over to Jamie and Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah. I suppose this is the second paper in regards to the open space and recreation plan. It's obviously there's a review that council has committed to undertaking in this year's operational plan. So in progressing that review, we thought we'd bring it back to the communities committee to have a bit of a discussion and hopefully a bit of a workshop around some of the aspirations for open space and recreation in Central Highlands. So just to paint a bit of a picture, I suppose there's a graphic there which shows where we're at in the current project status on the second page of the report. We have scoped the project. We did put a report which I believe went to the council portal in June. We have established a core working group and have our communications briefed in terms of our engagement strategies prepared as well. We've done an audit of other councils' open space and recreation plans to kind of, I suppose, get engaged for where parks provision in terms of infrastructure, number, area, and those types of things to try and do a bit of a comparison to where our current plans are and where we would like to be and what's sustainable for the Central Highlands. Where we're moving to now is our first round of community engagement in determining, I suppose, the community's aspirations for parks and public space for the Central Highlands. We see those, I suppose, sitting in the livability strategy generally in terms of those higher level outcomes that will feed into the open space and rec plan, but will definitely guide the direction of the open space and rec plan as well. So as a starting point, I suppose I did a bit of a merge of what we've said already and what the community has said already in terms of the community plan, the corporate plan, and where we're going today. So on the third page of that report, there's, I suppose, some bullet points which were intended to guide a workshop, hopefully a workshop style discussion around what some of the council's aspirations are for our parks and public spaces and what we would like them to be, look like, feel like, have, I suppose, those overarching statement levels.
It's important to recognise that we as a council need to have some strategic direction before we go out to consultation. Otherwise, we're going to be here in 5 years' time. So the purpose of what we're trying to do is establish our own criteria for what, as a council, we believe is required in our open space and rec plan. And once we've identified that, that's what we'll be taking out to the community to consult on.
So through the chair, Mark, I'm glad you said that. So we do the hard work ourselves and come up with that before we go into consultation. Yeah, that's the most important part for me, because a lot of this is all connected to levels of service and asset management, provision of collective services, and I think the hard work needs to be done by us, determining hierarchy, determining intervention levels, maintenance standards, and we can do that, demonstrate cost efficiencies, and that might include some outsourcing of responsibility to certain parks or parts of parks, provide business opportunities to the community, we might get a better result. All the heavy lifting, if we do that, I think then we're in a great position to be able to go and seek feedback from the community on what to next. If we go too early, we always run the risk of them saying, you're not doing a good enough job on this park, or why isn't there any investment in infrastructure in this place, and we set ourselves up for criticism straight away. But I think if we do the hard work ourselves and working out what it is we want to achieve, then we're in a good position to go to the community. So I'm glad you said that, and if we need to dedicate time at a strategy meeting or a future committee meeting, we'll definitely do that so we can have those discussions and workshops.
Yeah, there's two things I want to point out that are running in conjunction. You've got the sport and rec work through the panel that we've established, and we've also got the open space and rec plan. So the two of them are running almost in parallel together. Okay, so there will be overlaps between some of those issues, because as you'll see in what we want to discuss, that Jamie's going to talk through, is we want to look at some of our broader strategy in terms of sport and rec stuff today as well. So that's where the sport and rec panel will get more into the specifics, whereas this one here is our overriding strategy in terms of where we're heading. You'll also notice, before I hand back to Jamie, that we believe that this needs to be done almost community by community. It's too big to throw it out and try and do the whole lot. And you'll see today our emphasis is mostly around Emerald, because we want to use that as our template to guide us going forward. And we believe if we get a working picture together for Emerald, we can easily then duplicate that through for the rest of the community. So don't fear, we haven't missed the other communities, but we just see that it's going to be impossible to try and concentrate on every community at one time. So that, again, is where we're trying to head with this.
Mr. Chair, can I just go Jamie and Mark? We are just specifically talking about parks and open spaces and not sporting precincts.
So parks are all inclusive, being whether it's recreation parks or a sport park. It's hard to get another word that includes all of them. So parks is, yeah. And then for the purpose of the aspirations workshop today, I've also included public places. Through the livability strategy, it'll be a bit more broad again. So even all your open, your streets and like out the front of the council building, outdoor plaza area, things like that too. But yeah, parks for the purpose of the open space and rec plan is passive recreation, active recreation, organised and unorganised sport.
Does that also include things like footpaths and things like that, connectivity? And
major cycling lanes.
Yeah. So we'll hopefully, I suppose in the open space and rec plan, there will be your recreation corridors, which will be your major ones. As another document that'll sit under the open space and rec plan will be, I suppose, a broader walk and cycle network, which will look more at the nitty gritty and ordering, and similarly to how you've got collector roads, you'll have collector pathways and things to that effect too. To make sure we're making infrastructure work and function as it should.
So through the chair, I think this probably goes without saying, but I support the approach of looking at it town by town, but also support that looking at the entire region. Because if you did develop a set of standards or service standards or maintenance standards for your premier open space area in a town, then you wouldn't want each town to identify which is their top of the tree, and then we'd still be able to provide a service. If we can still have that strategy where we're saying that number one in the whole region is botanical gardens, number two might be linear parklands and develop, and number three might be Dorinda, as an example. They might be the only three that get the higher standards or the lower tolerances or intervention levels for affecting maintenance. And then the next tier down, there might be another 6 parks across the region. So I'm pretty sure, I'm sure that will be considered, even though we're having a look from a town by town perspective.
Yeah, so the goal, I suppose, in deliverable for the open space and rec plan, we generally see that we'll identify our facilities. It will put them into the category, be it generally speaking for recreation parks, regional, district, local, using Emerald and Springshire as an example. Regional park is really just the Botanical Gardens. We've only got one regional park in our council area. And then the majority of other parks throughout Emerald are local parks. But then for the likes of Springshire, the Sevilla Parklands that runs along the creek there is a district park, and then the other parklands through Springshire will be local parks. So it still fits into that broader strategy too. Then at those category levels, we would then spell out essentially the minimum desired standards of service in terms of embellishments that those parks would have in them. And then the same thing, I suppose, generally applies for sporting facilities as well. Generally, sport is identified at 2 levels, regional and district, and similarly spells out the types of improvements and standards of maintenance.
That sounds really good, Jane.
It does, I like where you come with it. Yeah.
That's the goal.
We just need to break it down so we can process it,
Yeah.
but understanding what we've got, what the users are, who the users are. And
how we can best
Yeah.
service what their needs really are. And I suppose if we've got facilities which are operating above or outside of what they really should be, what their category designation really is, then how we can either, if they need to be reclassified, or why the higher category isn't being used to its fullest potential, and what we can do to change that. So trying to get, I suppose, our infrastructure working as best as it can.
And you'll see by today's discussion, we're trying to bring a lot of focus back onto the Botanical Gardens, which, you know, we believe has dropped off the horizon quite a bit for the last few years. So that's why we're trying to focus back in on some of these, what we consider our key facilities across the region.
I was going to ask, how does the flood mitigation affect it, but that's a separate issue in itself. So, is there any other questions?
Well,
Just wonder if we can work through that document.
Yeah.
We work through that document, is that the one on
That
PowerPoint?
would be great.
2016 onwards is the one?
Yeah. I suppose so they were just kind of capturing some keywords around what generally parks and public places is best practice for them to be, and then things that we want to capture local for our demographic and relative to where we are as well.
So I suppose I'm just, I don't know, where do we sort of break down active parks, passive parks?
So that's broken down. So this, for the purpose of the aspirations are our overarching goals that will feed through to the open space and recreation plan in terms of looking at making sure we've got the appropriate provision of our categories of sport and our recreation parks and things to that effect. But generally speaking, a local park or a regional sport park should be able to be aligned with our aspirations for our parks too.
There are some places that you don't want to have a lot of activity in, but just
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there's a lot of places you want passive stuff and active stuff and not passive.
Yeah. So I suppose aspirations should generally be that at a very, very basic level that we do have parks, that they are there, that they are probably beautiful. They cater for our population out here. They celebrate where we are, being in a regional area. They are conducive to leading active, healthy lifestyles.
So the first, just going to that first one, I mean, it's a very, very broad statement and I'm happy with it, but just it can give you the thinking that you can participate in a lot of passive activities wherever you go, or you can be an active wherever you want to go. And I just think there needs to be the words of where appropriate or where designed or where specifically laid out, because I don't think people of all abilities will want to be, can actually be in a golf course or a racetrack or a horse racetrack. Or there might be places where there's going to be, some limitations. I just, I just wonder if we can just say that where.
Do you want to say versus maybe our parks and other places will provide opportunities for all ages, all abilities and backgrounds to be outdoors, because that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be in every single park. Yeah.
Something like that. It's just a differentiation between what we are able to provide safely for people in all places. All places that we specifically do.
Yeah, so these certainly by no means are far from bedded down. I was just trying to capture some keywords and goals to see if we're generally going along the right path and aligning with the other documents, which we have said things along these lines. Definitely would like to be more concise, but just for discussion purposes, I tried to put something.
People shouldn't be able to play cricket in the middle of Vicky Peters Park where kids are sitting there with red balls written around their ears. I mean, it's just that we've got to make sure that we have got that differentiation and what we're saying is not just that general that you can do if you feel like where we want to go.
Yeah, no. So in the, I suppose these will sit in a higher document than the open space and rec plan.
Yeah.
The open space and rec plan will be more specific in what a local park will physically be intended to be used for and what a district park will be used for and what a regional sports field should be used for.
And what the 27 finger parks in theory will be used for.
Nature reserve.
So I suppose does everybody agree, should our parks and public places encourage be designed for all, or relative to our demographic, but be designed for all ages, abilities and backgrounds?
I think all your documents are fair.
Yeah.
But I think for me, and they're broad sweeping statements generally, but I think part of what, and if I'm wrong about this, let me know, but part of this is about for us to understand what we have and how we manage it going forward. But you're breaking it up in terms of establishing a hierarchy. But part of that is understanding what we have and what the uses are currently, who the users of those facilities are, what standards we're going to maintain. And so all of those dot points come into that.
Yes.
I think for me it's about seeing what we've got and then.
Okay. So I suppose
I probably work a little differently. But,
well, we can bring that back, I suppose, at a later date. I suppose I just wanted to make sure that our aspirations are set and we're feeding it down versus going in one direction with the plan that doesn't necessarily align with councils and the community's aspirations in terms of parks too. So that's why I'm trying to start up a bit high level.
It could, through the chair too, Jamie, be opportunities for rationalisation. I'm not too sure how this council's approached development in the past, but I know some councils seek to cleverly maintain some parkland as freehold tenure to give them flexibility in the future. And there could be rationalisation in the terms of using the land for something else. Or, as the General Manager mentioned, returning it to just a nature reserve, so therefore your maintenance comes right down. You just got a little bit of, woodland or grass area or something like that.
I would think through like the general statements like our parks and public places would be located and designed for our community. If we've got ones that aren't fulfilling that, then that's completely consistent and rationale enough to, and we'll pick that up through our audit as well, and hope from community feedback as well in relation to what we wanted.
I'm not too sure what again through the chair, the trends are in urban planning, but maybe it makes sense to hang on and retain those sites because of the, evolving communities and having spaces where it might only be 30 or 40 houses can access an open area to kick a football around or have a picnic. Maybe there's merit in retaining that and not using it for something else, even though you might only need to have a park like that to service 80 houses or 100 houses. So maybe merit in retaining it because of the unknowns. But I still think rationalisation should be looked at because we've got to look at the financial implications of maintenance.
And I suppose too, something we found which is, we don't want to get to the stage of bringing to everybody just yet, but generally speaking, we've got a lot of parks that don't have great street frontage and might just have one entry in, so they're not great from a crime prevention through environmental design perspective. So that's another conversation too to have a bit later down the track, what we want to do in relation to those ones. Some which we have done the improvements in them only in the last 12, 18 months. So that's really a great place to be encouraging kids to congregate where nobody can see them.
We've got a few like that.
we haven't got really that aspect of safety in there, isn't
Yeah,
it?
Well connected, safe and
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
you've got
yeah,
those.
yeah, we've got
Okay,
that.
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, safety and security improvement is another angle.
So are there, in those general dock points, are there things that are missing, things that don't need to be said? Or generally speaking, every single park or in terms of our park strategy, it should deliver on those outcomes?
I just, you know, I don't even know where we need to. What about the contributors that work towards getting our parks and gardens going with our, so developers? And how they allocate particular parks might not always be that park is provided the best public place or the best place, whatever. And then what do we actually put in those parks, and what does the developer sort of, so I think I sat down with the developer from Mayfair, what's the next one out? Miranda Heights, and said to him, I reckon we should put a skyrocket and a ferry park in here, and I think he was thinking more racehorses, because every street out there is named after a bloody racehorse, or a racing place or something, aren't they, Mr. Mayor? So, so maybe, but so I think there are some other people that have aspirations about this. Then there's the state government that put a lot of money into sport and recreation facilities, and the federal government put a lot of money into sport and recreation facilities, as do some private committees. I don't know whether it needs to be in there, but I couldn't find where it was. But just, you talk about how we locate and design for our community reflecting demographics. We talk about reflecting history. We talk about, and then the second off one I thought, does it go in there where the maintenance cost and establishment goes? But, and is that broad enough to sort of cover all those?
I suppose, in terms of location of future parks as well, with the planning scheme, the local government infrastructure plan forming part of the planning scheme, that identifies where we want future parks to go. And the open space and rec plan talks to it in saying that park is a local park, it is to have these types of embellishments in it and be constructed to the standard, it's to have this much road frontage connected into the pathway network like this. So in terms of, I suppose we shouldn't be in the issue, a situation moving forward, where we'll be given parks that don't address our needs. We've got enough documents in place, I think, that will avoid that happening.
The other part of that is we don't necessarily want little two pot blocks of land everywhere. You know, if that's the idea, we want to be able to look for contributions that we can then put back into our botanical gardens, rather than create more small, almost, worthless blocks of land that we're forever maintaining. So that's also part of where we're heading with the old gym.
Through the chair, just to clarify, so this includes street furnitures as well? That's an open space?
Yeah, generally for recreation corridors, yeah. For the purpose of the aspirations, yes, it will include public places, but the open space and rec plan will just look at recreation corridors, which are generally the ones in reserves, so like along the botanical gardens, and some of the major connectors. If we get that connection through to Morton Park, that will be captured as a recreation corridor as well.
Okay.
In those types of ones. But for the purpose of aspirations, absolutely, they cover any public place.
Yeah. And look, it might be covered with that community pride, but I guess I'd love to see the, the friends of the botanic gardens, and also, those, I guess, bringing communities together through parks. And I know there's an active Ralston community around their main park as well. So if that can be picked up. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I think it sounds good. I think it's heading in the right direction. So what will happen next, Jamie?
Well, I suppose for the aspirations, we would like to, I suppose, confirm that they generally align with the community, community's aspirations in terms of parks and public places. Just in generally speaking, through it wasn't going to be a large amount of engagement, but just, I suppose, through surveys, going out to the community reference groups and just gauging what everybody envisions a park should be. And I suppose there's a lot of that work already done through the community plan and then reflected through the corporate plan too, in what the general aspirations are, but it would be I think, beneficial just to test the water again and confirm that we've still got them right on those documents. So that's the next step for improving the open space and rec plan. From there, I suppose we will finesse our identification of all our facilities and the categories of them as well, and then bring that back for discussion as well.
Yeah.
Is the next one that I would expect that will come.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Mel, my suggestion is come back to what we've spoken before about those people partnerships. And I think it's in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 6 top point. Council recognises this role, the provision of quality parks. I just think something needs to be put in there, maybe in partnership or whatever, quality parks and public places as, you know, as preventative healthcare, whatever. But I just think there needs to be a provision of us being the main provider. It is our role, but we do it in partnership. So there needs to be something along those lines, those words, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
The other area, I still think we probably just, in that last paragraph in regards to being often local, regional, state, there needs to be some sort of state provision. Because I know with horses and all sorts of other things is state level facilities, and one of the real hassles I have probably with our previous planning is that whether it becomes whatever sport and recreation facilities it is, we don't often do it in conjunction with state organisations. So we build a lovely netball, which we sort of said to lovely Emerald, Central Queensland, Central Islands region, but we didn't do that with a whole other discussion with the state body. We don't do it with rugby league, we don't do it with soccer, we don't do it with hockey. And we build these facilities then, and that quite often where we can attract more funding through these state organisations. And the state organisations are quite often sitting on the boards at the state level that make decisions on state allocations as well. So I think we've got to bring that state stuff in there because it's the states are a continued channeler of funding into these organisations, these places, and when you look at some of the horse sports and other sports we've got here, we certainly have got nationally significant facilities, but I still think we probably need to make sure we also have that estate standard, state recognition of those different levels, hierarchies.
Yeah.
That's a good point, I reckon, because with the tweaking, slight tweaking, that could provide a whole suite of other opportunities.
Yes, absolutely.
We might be on the precipice of,
Yeah.
meeting a standard to hold a significant event that may be, statewide.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, completely agree with that.
But I think the aspirations of the community are all wrapped up in there, actually.
Okay, so
Great job.
we'll finesse that a bit more. So moving on, I suppose I'll just quickly hand around a presentation because it might be easier to see that on the screen.
I guess this stage of it now is starting to talk about some of the nitty-gritty stuff as to where we might be looking to head. Particularly with our focus on Emerald, and we want to start looking at the specifics around some of our sporting precincts, also the botanical gardens and what some of our plans and that may be there.
So I suppose to start, the Botanical Gardens are our token regional park. There's the opportunity to, while the open space rec plan review is ongoing, we're very confident that that status of that park is not going to change, to look at reinvesting in, I suppose, restoring and bringing it to the regionally significant status that it does have. So we've just done a bit of a, I suppose, opportunity mapping presentation for what we see as a great opportunity to, I suppose, work with the developer contributions that are in the constrained funds at the moment for parks, partnering and using those to apply for further grants through the Get Playing Places and Spaces funds and other ones that arrive with the assistance of CHGC. So I suppose generally just talking through what we've kind of drawn up for the east and west side, starting with the west side. is relooking at the activity node that's there, and opportunities to, I suppose, further expand that to be better inclusive in terms of age and abilities as well. Age not just for children, but also through to adults as well. The location, the activity node being up on the high ground, I suppose recognises where the playground existing is, and the monorail as well, and the toilets, and things like that. Generally speaking, if you can cluster your activities together, you're going to create places where people are going to stay. Sight lines from the playground to the toilet, whilst they're not amazing, they're certainly better than where they are down at the barbecues. And up the top, it's got better flood immunity than what it does down in the river. So generally, in terms of pathway provision, we've looked at the providing a new pathway from the higher end of the free camping area under the railway bridge, connecting through to the toilets and around to the activity node. And then I suppose that connects into the existing 2 metre wide path, which runs along behind Mackindo Park, and then would form part of a broader loop with the east side of the gardens as well. Looking at redoing an entry statement at that car park, because that is really one of our major entry points to the gardens, and improving our maps and legibility of the park as well, because at the moment it's really not amazing. So I suppose the next few pages have some indicative images, which I suppose were just kind of ideas and for the west side. Generally that we would like to design a multi-age play space designed to encourage physical, creative, cognitive and social play for all ages. The inclusion of picnic nodes with seating, barbecues and shelter, drinking fountains and bench seating throughout. Relocating the existing gym equipment that's sporadically located throughout the park in a not really user-friendly manner to being in clusters along the main pathway, so you can create a circuit and make it a bit more user-friendly, and improve some of the, I suppose, information around that as well. And I suppose there's further opportunities there in a launch of any park to partner with some fitness providers in town to show people how to use the equipment as well. So for the west side, generally wanting to continue with the consistent colour theming that's existing there in the orange, blues, blacks and greys, feeding that through to any shelters and improvements that go in, and also through to the toilet block as well, and giving that whole area a facelift. So nice, bright, colourful, playful.
I guess the whole emphasis, what we're trying to do with the botanics is we've got infrastructure down in the lower sections currently. When that becomes obsolete, we intend to pull it out and not replace it. So we'll leave the pathways through those areas, but we want to basically put our infrastructure back up, at least into the higher areas, so the impacts on flooding are minimised to a certain degree. That's on both sides of the river.
What are those blokes on that photo near the river they're looking for?
Oh, that was you planking, Bill.
My son must have lost too much. Never seen that before.
That's the PTSD challenge, according to that challenge.
Yeah. You and the former mayor, I reckon that is.
Me and Pusher.
I suppose, and also through in reviewing the, coming up with an information strategy and improving the legibility of the park as a whole, so incorporating where your major entry points are, your subordinate entry points, junction signage, so your wayfinding through the park's a lot easier, and finding what the cool improvements that are in there, like the marbles and the celestial gardens, and telling their story a bit more, so that tourists coming through can actually understand what they are, as versus just being like, oh,
And the flying fox.
interesting.
And the flying fox.
Yeah.
Yeah, the main stuff. Yeah.
You'll just notice the one photo that's up on the board there. we're sort of thinking that we've got the community signboards as you come into the individual towns and the like. We're sort of looking at the idea of trying to bring that type of sign into the actual main signboards as well, so it sort of keeps that theme running.
This is the rusty one.
Yeah.
The rusty sign.
Yeah.
Acid wash, but.
Sorry.
I suppose they can let people come and actually see, when you're driving
Yeah.
past at 100 kilometres an hour, you can't really get an appreciation for what they are. If you have one that you can, in a format you can actually stop and stare at and touch and watch the shadows play through, it's a bit nice.
Jenny Lex is here for this discussion because.
What you're saying, though, get some uniformity in here.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
whether that's not those types of signs and it's something completely different, that's all right too, but uniformity, and then if we come up with something that can be rolled out region-wide as well. Yeah, I think that would be nice. It's a nice branding thing too, for council.
I think so.
So that's generally the western side. The eastern side, we identified, I suppose, some major pathways we would like to improve. These generally follow major pathways at the moment, but take advantage of natural shade that's existing there as versus locating them in some maybe more direct routes that are quite exposed. So very conscious that we've got an environment out here which winter in some years not so bad, but summer when it's 40 degrees, most people don't want to be outside. So how we can best locate our infrastructure to be used all year round, and what we can do to try and encourage people to be outdoors in that warmer time of year as well. So on the western or eastern side, sorry, I suppose re-looking at the activity node generally where the playgrounds and shelter is at the moment, looking at doing a major entry signage as well, and then that, sorry. No, sorry. Sorry. Next one, maybe? Oh, no. Sorry, please cut easily. Oh, great. Thank you. So the opportunity also that exists, I suppose, along the existing running track that runs along the river at the moment, if we're taking that gym equipment out to cluster it elsewhere, and we're not wanting to really invest in improvements in that area that is highly flood prone, what else we can use it for? And I suppose there's two kind of groups, the horse trail and possibly mountain biking, taking advantage of the banks of the river that come up to the higher ground on the eastern side of the gardens too. And that's definitely a use group that isn't necessarily catered for in the region at the moment. And whilst it's not your full adventure racing style, it's certainly somewhere where teenagers and things like that can hopefully recreate as well. In terms of the activity node on the eastern side, very conscious that we don't want to have it competing with the western side. We want it to have a point of difference. So looking at the area that is there at the moment is quite a desert environment. So incorporating in your natural features and encouraging your natural and explorative play through there. So providing a safe environment for adventures of all ages. So using a lot of natural elements, dry creek beds, climbing steps, balancing beams, and celebrating the kind of rural setting that is there as well. So it's just a nice, indicative images there as well.
I guess the question comes to you asked, you have something like what's up on the screen there now. Do we want to put some major investment in some sort of play equipment, climbing facilities, similar to what we're displaying there? We've got certainly the aspect there with the trees and everything else, and it is incorporated. And do we actually get advanced and go to that level of equipment and play style, as this is our regional facility? So these are some of the questions that we, and obviously there's some dollars tied up in doing that sort of thing. But again, we're heavily focused on a lot of this being able to be achieved through the securing of grants.
And our regional park, or I suppose our regional recreation park, we want people to come in and be able to spend the whole day there. We want it to have the facilities and provide the environment that people want to spend the whole day there. So that's definitely.
That's really good, but I think that's part of your conversation with the community, isn't it, too? You know, what sorts of things they might like to see there as well.
Yeah, so I suppose the regional park should cater for every single person in the Central Highlands, all ages, all abilities. It's the park that would have all those features in it versus the smaller local and district parks, which are more catered to the local demographic of those areas and not necessarily looking at the broader tourists as well. So that's the gardens, I suppose. If anybody has any comments or suggestions.
I guess as a starting point, is it a consensus that we're sort of on the right path with what we're trying to do with the botanical gardens? Because what we'd like to do is if there's reasonable agreement at this stage, we can start developing, you know, some plans and the like to go forward with.
Through the chair, I think you can, obviously, you know, the opportunity of, you know, bending your mind around these sorts of concepts is, you know, a great project because, you know, lots of ideas will come out. But as long as fundamentally they're matched against such, you know, those aspirational things and those really practical understanding that we have about, you know, the climate we live in, you know, what we have and you know, the environment that we work in. So as long as, you know, when you start incorporating those sorts of things, like having slides that are too hot for kids to get on, you know, shade the appropriate areas, they're all little tiny things, but they inevitably make us look insensitive sometimes when we go about doing these things. So like what Deputy Mayor was saying, Gail was saying about, you know, just, you know, being mindful of those, you know, sorts of things that your community want and understand. And, you know, certainly Councillor Daniel's family demographic is right in that space where, you know, they're using all those sorts of facilities and, you know, working out which are practical and safe, make the kids explore, and those sorts of things are really, you know, our age demographic is quite significantly peculiar, you know, to recognise those sorts of things. And then that terrain there, obviously, that we're looking at is quite peculiar again. So it's got to be a combination of those sorts of things to make it work. So I think you're doing that's a tremendous start. Obviously, a lot of flexibility around that. But I think a really good look around the site, you know, from all concerned, that we're talking about a group and a panel, and getting a real feel of the place is pretty important. So.
Can I just bring up that page we got about the opportunity horse trails, mountain bikes, etc. Can I say, I think that's a bit a bit overactive in some ways, but I've trouble with the horse trails, only particularly that we have enough troubles now with shifting weeds and pests and stuff down the river out of our botanical gardens and other places as it is. I'm just not too sure about whether or not that part of the river, which I know is heavily watched by EPA and others. They'd be encouraging other animals that stage, and also mountain bikes because of their corrosive activity and goes to the soil and the ground and the way in which they are. You have to do, you know, they are pretty high maintenance on the ground. They can do wear and tear and create a lot of, you know, erosion. So that area there is in some ways a bit pristine. Some of the things that are in there though, that people won't know too much about, and that we've identified some of them. There's a whole heap of indigenous stuff in there. There's a whole heap of marked trees. There was a site there for a camp. There is a whole heap of really good indigenous stuff in there. That, you know, and again, tying in with what's at the bottom of the rock range, where you've got a lot of different plant species coming down the rock range from the top to the bottom, and some of that's very much identifiable with Aboriginal health, medicine and food. This area here was actually got a little bit of participation of where Indigenous people live. So, as I said, there's a lot of bark taken off trees. There's a couple of old sacred trees there that people have told me about. So, I just don't know whether or not we should be looking at that sort of participation.
Oh.
I'll hand over now to Daniel, who'll know a little bit more about horse peddle in that area and a little bit about motorbikes, because it is a bit of a pristine area there, isn't it? No.
There's gravel roads, gravel tracks, fire trails within that area, that's where you're talking about, James. Yeah, I'm not sure. I wonder if it would be big enough for horses. I know it's
I suppose the horse concept is the idea of linking between the top and bottom wheels and having it as a continuous trail, so it's not just saying do laps in this area. The idea that a lot of people in town don't really have an area.
Yeah, as I said, it looks like a pretty good track to me.
Yeah, you'd be good,
I
right?
mean, if you're letting horses into the top and bottom wheel sections, there's just as much risk of weed spread there as in this section too.
So it was just, I suppose, an idea.
It's just
to throw
ideas,
around that whether that's a group in our area that isn't necessarily catered for to recreate on public land.
Yeah.
So whether that's something that we wanted to pursue, if it's not, we can abandon it now, that's completely
I think it
fine.
really is, but the places we need to in and around towns is our stock routes, where we do use those for those purposes. So horse sports and stuff, just general horse activities. We should really be utilising the stock routes that are identified. So a lot of those come into town and around town in different places. And during dry times, we transport a lot of stock over the top of them, so it's just ideal they match.
So you're planning to
Motorbikes are noisy bloody things of a Saturday morning.
Yeah,
No,
well,
they're not
No, we're not talking motorbikes.
not motorbikes, mountain bikes.
Motorbikes.
No, you wouldn't be.
But so you,
No,
the planning scheme sort of identifies where your horse ownership and where they tend to stay within here, like Edgewood and then further along, heading towards the Keith Valley. So there's places there, the stock routes are wide, and also in your rural residential subdivision areas, you've got these extraordinarily wide reserves, road reserves.
Yeah.
And so they're obviously problematic about maintenance, but if there's a 3 or 4 metre wide crushed gravel horse path, you see them right then and pass along the stock route past the airport and they can go around Moriarty Farms Road, back on Pilot Farm Road extended and come right back. And they're the sorts of things that will link your horse usage, separate something.
No, if that's, we can identify them in the, I suppose, the active transport plan as that's your specific route, if that's, we just weren't sure if that we wanted to capture this as an opportunity.
Yeah, just ideas.
Pathways, for bicycle, pedestrian style use,
It does look like there's well-worn paths down there.
There is,
Is that, are people driving down there as well, or is
No.
it just
No.
Bikes and pedestrians? Yeah,
and
because it does look like it's very popular
Yeah.
for that sort of thing.
But we can certainly take on the Aboriginal component too, as well, Mr. Chairman. That's very important.
I suppose in terms of the
Bushcraft.
mountain biking through that area, we're just looking at the areas that are existing and cleared, and that's an opportunity to, I suppose, get another user through there anyway, whether we formalise it or don't formalise it, we can't stop people from doing what they want in there anyway. Why don't we just give them a designated area to use?
Put some jumps in.
Yeah.
There's some already there.
Sorry?
There's some already there. We need to stop it. It's good. It's pretty rough. It's pretty rough terrain. So when we did the strat plan, I remember trying to connect from the north through to the south, pathways, linkages.
Yeah.
We've actually got that now identified, haven't we?
We've re-identified it, I suppose, later in the presentation as well.
The reason why we're particularly focused on trying to identify that, there's inconsistencies between what's in the town plan, what's in the walk cycle, transport, the traffic plan. So we're trying to formalise what we see is where we can run 2 good loops around Emerald on both sides of the river, and all up we can get about 20k, a 20k circuit, and a lot of the pathways already exist. There's other areas where they're too narrow, and we want to focus in on trying to widen that out. So essentially, part of what we're looking at is not only in the gardens here, those markers that show a distance, but also around that main route. And the other thing we want to incorporate is like your solar power lights and bollards if we haven't got street lighting and that, so that people can actually start to use it a little bit earlier, a little bit later.
Sure.
Great. There's some great examples of play equipment in this brochure because there is in the Emerald area and probably maybe across the whole of Central Highlands a lack of play equipment for older, like the tweens into your teenage years. So yeah, it's good. There's lots of challenging equipment examples here.
Yeah. And also conscious too, like adults can play, there's no reason you can't have fun things for everybody to get involved into. It's refreshing, it's,
The other part of that is clustering the exercise equipment in reasonable eyesight, so that if mum and dad go there with the children can play, and mum and dad potentially can do a little bit of exercise there somewhere close hands. So that's the sort of thing that we're trying to juggle.
And you're including like scooter-friendly paths.
we're thinking of figure of 8 around the monorail and looping around the picnic cones too.
That's
with
right.
your little like directional roundabout signage, similar signage to the BMX track with that little learn to ride circuit.
Okay,
Not
great.
to the same scale, but yeah, just a figure of 8 track around this too.
Yeah, because it's a different surface.
Yeah. But then for the rest of the paths, I suppose looking at keeping on using that exposed, so it's a bit grippier for inclement weather as well.
Yeah, okay.
But I suppose in having that smoother route, that's where you want the kids to stay too.
Yeah, looks good. I mean, and it is coming up as another agenda item, but you see, there's an exciting project, and that's the Emerald Park Run project that looks like it's being funded for the needs at 5K circuit within the park itself. So there's all these other activities that are wanting to come through that we should be keeping in mind as well.
And our problem is the existing pathways aren't wide enough and aren't suitable. They're cracking up and dropping off the edges, so that's what we're looking at, trying to designate a good wide path that everyone can use for that sort of enjoyment.
So moving on to sporting.
Have we got enough time? Are we okay to keep going?
Yeah, good.
We can have a break if you like and have morning tea and then come back to it if you like. Or you can keep going. Do you want to finish this first or? Finish this, well then we'll have a quick break and then.
We might lose momentum.
Yeah.
Okay, finish, okay, there you go.
Okay. So looking around the Mackindoe Park area, and I suppose field sports more broadly in Emerald and regionally, Mackindoe Park is a regional rectangular sporting facility. The opportunity that does exist around consolidating our field sports to a single precinct in Emerald, making our existing infrastructure through the Mackindoe Park Function Facility work harder rather than duplicating everywhere. And I suppose the constraint at the moment with cricket not having a formal home. So there's some of the where we're coming from. We've just presented, I suppose, a few options today in looking at possibly purchase or the opportunity to purchase Epic all sports land where cricket are at the moment, and the ability to possibly fit in 2 additional rectangular fields in there as well. The opportunity that exists where the Ensham land is could accommodate 2 round fields and 4 rectangular fields as well, while still allowing sufficient pitch area for cricket. In doing those two things, that allows council to, I suppose, provide the missing green link between the gardens and Morton Park. Obviously a future constraint to physically cross the railway track, but that's a conversation that we're working through, and we'll continue to figure out how best to get across that railway track.
Go underneath it, like we do.
Sorry?
Go underneath it, like we do now.
I suppose in a manner that's actually designed for pedestrian uses versus stormwater use would be nice.
It's not very accessible, I guess, for people with lower mobility and transports.
My understanding originally it's a stormwater culvert that's being used for pedestrian pathway, which isn't really a good purpose. So talking briefly to our infrastructure team, seems like possibly just an at-grade crossing, not that we've got many up here, but they're everywhere through Brisbane with the automatic gates, that just at grade can be the most feasible option, just to get the support of QR to go down that path. We haven't had that conversation yet. It's on the cards to have.
Might not be accessible either, it's pretty steep.
But until, there's ways you can get around that. It's better than if you have an actual overpass. The physical, I suppose, effort of looking at an overpass and crossing the road will stop people from using it. So how you can get people to get across as easily as possible. Going under, I wouldn't imagine people, I don't imagine QR are going to support automated rides. You might be able to elaborate a bit more on that. But
we drilled about 19 holes between Coles and the Buddy, underneath there, and put big pipes in.
Yeah.
I mean, going underneath, to me, you haven't got to worry about people with disabilities, all the other stuff. Once you go up steps, once you start to go up grades, restricting people with premiums, and I don't know, so it doesn't really matter which way you go. The best way is always grade, I reckon. Never you can do now, just to grade, because you just restrict any people's access to go up in the air.
Yeah.
Except for that, I like that thing in the park where you got to climb up it and go walk through the trees. That might not do. I like that one. But yeah, I mean, it'd just be easy to tunnel under it and go up.
I guess what we're trying to do here is facilitate.
It's great to have that connection.
Yeah.
Is facilitate discussion around, should we be looking at trying to secure this land, or the options are you move out of the area and set up a greenfield site somewhere that's going to be flood free and the like. The problem is, we see it, this land has got little other use at present because it's all highly flood prone and it's also quick flowing water coming through this particular land. That was the reason for wanting to put this up for discussion, as to, whether we should pursue discussions around this with the landowners.
And I also like the fact that it's in the centre of town as well. So it's very accessible for everyone.
But yeah, and to allude from that, if we do have the greenfield site, that's a big issue. You're increasing your vehicle reliance as well, in that most of the time they're generally not very well connected, or they're at one end of town, so people are not likely to ride or walk to place sport either.
Those red circles of opportunity, are they at risk of being anything else other than parkland? I know with the epic stuff, that's not at risk of any other development.
Yeah, so I suppose there's no, the Ensham land, which is the triangle block, there's no applications over that, and the planning scheme is not supportive of anything other than recreation in the high flood hazard area. The land behind Route 66, which is owned by, I think it's Biggle Investments, it does have a current application over it. It was lodged in 2010, and they would like it on hold until we build levies. We're working through that, that's a separate matter. It's also in the high and extreme flood hazard area, and it's not going to be supported. There's no development that could go there that I imagine, that the planning scheme doesn't envision any development going there. In short.
Just, I'll provide a bit of a devil's advocate. If we looked at this, if we looked at these, the Mackendale Field Sport Precinct, and I know that Councillor Bell and Mark and I and Councillor Mackendale looked at this as well to try and make it our premier sort of our rectangular sports and address for some of the circular sports, including cricket. But if we know that's in a sort of a high flow area as well, you know, and I think having it close to the CBD is certainly the way to go, because we have been talking to the Ag College as well. There's a bit of a component about looking at our major sporting precinct either shifting out to the Ag College. But if we consider this option, we'd have to seriously look at the infrastructure that we'd actually place on that site, wouldn't we? You know, and again, I'm saying, you know, if you wanted to make that the key sporting or the premium sporting precinct for, say, the Highlands or even Central Queensland, then, you know, you're looking at facilities, you're looking at clubhouses, you're looking at grandstands, you're looking at lighting, you're looking at all of that. I'm just wondering, you know, with what we're talking about here now, is that something that we would consider, or would we be keeping it sort of a little bit more immature with the facilities that we put on those sites?
I suppose in looking at the QRI, or the epic land, sorry, and entered land, we would envision that they generally stay very, not
Yes.
improvements, seating, bench seating and things like that to allow, I suppose.
Remove
watching of the sport and things to that effect, but in terms of change rooms or toilets and things to that effect, generally, I imagine we probably need to put a setting, but you'd be wanting to have the connections really well back to Mackendale Park and taking advantage of consolidating your infrastructure in that area.
I guess the broader plan, and again, this is another one that is up for discussion, is we've currently got the function centre, cost council a lot of dollars to maintain. Is that up for discussion about allowing the football club and that to take that facility on and managing? Because they've got an existing clubhouse down lower in the flood area. The change rooms are almost getting to the point of needing to be replaced. So is that also a conversation that we can look to have with the sporting groups taking over that, so it eliminates the issue that we had recently where someone books the Mackendale Centre, the rugby league then has the finals there, so straight away you have the conflict between the football and the group wanting to hire the facility. We're seeing that there's an opportunity to reduce council's operating costs by allowing the clubs to run and manage and maintain the function centre. And again, this is the sort of discussion, you know, we want to have here to see whether, you know, we're heading in the right direction with some of these sports, or whether there's objection to, you know, us considering these, you know, is it out of play, or should we be looking at it?
So I think that,
Okay, it comes back to me, it comes back to when you go to the state, regional and national stuff, and I just think you're never going to be able now with the flood prone area of Mackendale and other things provide a state type facilities, rugby league, rugby union, soccer. If you were talking about that facility which we were before, or that area, you can't now take sewage and water and stuff down there that's going to, particularly sewage, that's going to get inundated. You know, it goes through there at 1.5 metres to 2 metres high. So, you know, everything you're going to try and build down there, you'd have to build way out of the facility, because, you know, the flooding inundation that went in through those toilets, you know, just and all that other stuff, all your open sewage stuff down there really is a quarry. So you're really going to have to look at, I think this is going to be that more of that junior and other participatory sports, or passive area, or like a cricket, you know, but, you know, where you're talking about where you put the toilets, the facilities, the change rooms, you just can't do it down there, can you?
Well, I suppose that with earthworks as a whole, you can do compensatory earthworks, so you're not, you're removing, or I suppose excavating from a floodplain area to put it in an area that's not floodplain and making sure that you're not worsening flood model at the same time. So you can, there's ways around that. There's, I suppose, yeah, that's another point. There's no other central location that we could get that is flood free. If it's not here, this land's going to be nothing really, and council's going to have to maintain it anyway if you duplicate it somewhere else. But in terms of your improvements, you can do compensatory earthworks to.
I guess,
So the only place that stayed out of any bloody water last time was up on top of the hill where those houses are. The rest of it all went under. Now, that whole fish street had bloody a metre and a half of water through it all. So it's, yeah, there's nothing you can really build in there that you couldn't, you'd have to build very, very high islands and big lots of them for viewing areas or for, you know, whatever else you wanted to, you know. Whether you're talking about facilities like canteens, you know, toilets and showers.
It's also designing things to be, if we go down the path of having, I suppose, investing in consolidating beyond sports this area, designing things that are flood resilient, so you can just hose them out and you can design buildings quite well these days that are adaptable and resilient to natural disasters.
I guess what would be looking at for amenities is actually elevating them to about floor height of Macindoe Function Centre on the end or whatever.
Yeah, we never had water through it. Yeah, all those toilets and showers, everything underground there, you've got to have meters of water pumping through those showers and toilets.
Yeah, all those, that existing amenities block, I don't think you'd want to be putting it back on the ground.
That's what I'm saying, is that it's therefore, if you're going to go to any sort of state level stuff or other level, higher level of usage areas, you can't do it. But you can have the participatory stuff of, you know, where kids play sport, people play cricket, do that stuff, that's all right. But I don't think you can do, when you come back to the original plan we talked about before, of what's a concept, you could never build a state level facility like we were talking about, and then the old concept of, you know, having that 2 or 3 fields, one of which would be at a state level sort of, you know, lighting and stuff. You just can't, you know, there's too many assets that you just can't build in there, you know, I don't think. You really got to go back over to, you know, with rugby union and with league and with soccer, and those eventually go back over somewhere like around the for the big facility where you're putting the, you know, the big you know, the big entertainment centre type activity around, either near the, where Mark and I was talking about before, you know, out near the, where the rugby unions, the league fields are now, at the Ag College or somewhere higher, you know. You've got to stay on that side, you've got to get across, away from this side of the river.
Yeah.
If you're going to that national level and stuff where you're going to put in, you know, really significant amounts of bloody infrastructure.
Other stadiums, I suppose elsewhere in Queensland, do flood, heavily flood in large flood events. So it's just a risk assessment really as to if that's acceptable to council, given the location, the convenience and the existing infrastructure that's existing here versus the cost of relocating it all elsewhere and that duplication. So that's a risk benefit analysis that. And
that's one of the benefits we've got, because there's nothing really there at Mackinac Park now with the same. You know, those old toilets and showers, we built those in 1986. You know, they're bugging. You know, when you have a look at them, the old club, that Bob Love clubhouse in the middle, it was built in 1972 and translocated from Rundle Park down to there in 1980. It's buggered. It's been underwater 3 times. You know, it's completely shattered. The only thing we're saving is the Mackinac Park facility, which we sort of said, well, it's really a community town hall. Like it's a, and if you ever lose this town hall, because you're going to build something on the other side, it becomes a whole new bloody facility. So it's got, you know, it's got a whole new community access then. So, I mean, if we're thinking out loud, if we ever change this town hall, and we do something really, really big at another place, you'd make this in a car park, wouldn't you?
I would really hope not. That's just my opinion as a town planner, that's a terrible outcome.
What would you do with it?
Centre of town.
Well, we've got no car park, I mean, people.
Well,
don't-
you
in
want
February.
to, well, why, you would want to be encouraging people to not use cars to come into the centre of town and design your environment so that you're not having those vehicle lines, sorry.
Councillor Bell, they'll be driverless and stackable all the time.
Yeah.
Don't lie in. I suppose
I'll
very,
put those
it's
around.
such a
Well,
fun area, that's
There's
so
there's a
easy
huge,
to get
there's a
everything.
huge loss of car parking here. Whatever you do down here, you take that old building down. Again, it's another one. We built in 1972 or 73. And it has roof problems, leaks, it's got all the structural problems with it. So what do you do with the hall? You know, where do you put that next, a lot of car parks, as I said, you can't get car parking by CBD. So, and what do you build around it? So it's got to go flat and you've just got to get something built on it. And whether you ever go back to a town hall again, if you've got another big active, wholly active facility over the other side, the only place you'll then is Magno Park. So as Magno Park actually become nothing to do with sports, but it becomes more of a little town hall where you can have your weddings and have your other functions. You can tie in with that other stuff, and you really start to go whole new Green Street site with your major facilities. Because at the moment, as I said, you've got soccer gets flooded, Union gets flooded, League gets flooded, and none of the facilities that we've got on those sites at the moment are by any means new, pristine, or the same. We hand-built that bloody clubhouse for Rugby Union, working bees, and we dug the hole where it sits. In Kangaroo 86 or someone was here, they put their dozers in it, they lay hole for us with their dozers. Because they were here at the same time, because, it was all done by weekend labour. And so there's nothing, as I said, there's no great investments. When you go to other communities and you see that big new investment, there's nothing in here that's really worth, that huge amount of money that we've spent $5 million in the last 40 years on it. So I just think that, as I'm saying, is that, what do you do with it? What do you do with all the facilities? Don't you have to start thinking about this as a town hall? And it probably won't have a life after whatever might happen out here in the new facilities.
I think through the chair, Councillor Bell, what you're doing is pushing some boundaries around what are we really thinking about where we want our communities to go. And James, here, I encourage you to have those debates. Now may not be the time, but at some stage, this is the sort of stuff we should be doing, is actually really challenging one another about where we're headed and what we're going to do. I think our town planning staff need that insight as civic leaders on what you think are the priorities, so that they can get on and start to plan and provide better recommendations and advice to council. But I'm thinking maybe through the chair and possibly Councillor Hayes, maybe we dedicate some time and either a strategy meeting or some other workshop where we can start to say, well, what do we really need to do? What are the aggressive type moves we need to consider in communities like Springshore and Emerald to make them more relevant in the future? Where are they really heading? And I think that involve the town planners in those discussions. So really have a bit of debate and get some good outcomes, because if we don't have some idea, we're not really leading the communities. We're not in a position to go public and ask for feedback. I think we have to do some heavy lifting or some hard thinking first.
Oh, we have to, because, the whole bloody thing about the, redevelopment of Magnet Park and the building that new facility there was talking about very considerable, large, rake seating or, high seating and proper mounded seating around, around the field. All of that, everything you talk about doing that sort of stuff to change the flow tremendously in that floodplain area. You can't do it.
And that comes back to your compensatory earthworks in making sure that you design it so it doesn't really. So it's, I suppose, generally there's an engineering solution to everything. And if it was something that was wanting to be pursued, it would be,
The cost of design.
And that comes back to your cost benefit analysis. What is a more
And then if in whatever any
solution for the
time,
community?
there is a flood mitigation scheme put in there, talking about running a bloody 4 metre wide lines up, walk down the middle of it. Do you reckon everything you're thinking about now, all these even squares on the field, have all got big walls through the middle? So, stay away from it, keep it flat, keep it open, don't do nothing on it. It's a big step, but I think the community's got to make that step. It's not the right place to be doing anything. Because I think if I remember rightly, that money, if you put a levee through there, it's about 3 or 4 metres high, it went right through the middle of the football field.
That's right.
No, and then all the way through to, what's his name, so to the top of where those big holes are. I mean, so that wrecks all your stuff you're doing here on that side of the field. It's just, I think, you know, don't even put it in the thinking basket, I reckon you're gonna shit. Going uphill, and all that stuff would have been great if we never even flooded. And if you were going to put that big wall through there and you're going to put floodproofing in, flood levees in, you might be able to do something up the hill a bit further. But the only high points on there, hazy around those houses, aren't they? Where those houses are in the railway houses is the only high point on Opal Street. New Street there.
New Street, and up the corner of New Street, Robert Street.
Roberts, I mean, yeah, there's nothing in between them. That's the only little high note over there, and it's all got residential on it. So, yeah, all I'm saying is that I think we've got to really bite the bullet on this. And it's really
And that's exactly the reason why we want to have these discussions, because this is basically in terms of where we're wanting to go, open space and rec plan. And this is what we need to identify and have this open discussion around where we see ourselves heading, so that we can start planning towards that.
So I suppose generally speaking, I suppose the junior sports and things to that effect continue to consider in these areas, but in terms of any additional investment, avoid like the playing.
I think so. If I was the federal government, I was going to give you, say, 15 million to fix up a nice new bloody multi-purpose bloody sporting facility with, you know, rugby union, rugby league, soccer, where you have a major final and you bring people from Rocky out here to play, and you know, and you have that sort of central, you know, that national, regional, state sort of, or say the state and regional facility, where you get 1,000 seats, say 5,000 to 7,000 people. Where would you put it?
Up for discussion.
Stick it in the floodplain.
I think there's places that I think also, this is through the chair, maybe what we're talking about here now, we need to go to even more of a helicopter view and have a look at some of the higher order challenges that are strategic land use type challenges driven by things like sport, recreation and other uses, and do some thinking around that, because that might inform how we tackle issues like the one before us today, the botanical gardens and trying to address.
What Jamie's saying is right, you know, it's a perfect playing field because every 25 to 30 years nothing gets touched. It's good.
Yeah.
I suppose is there support in trying to develop a multi-use field area? That would be a shared facility between rugby union, rugby league, cricket, soccer, and allow that sharing of having a field that both clubs would share that facility. There is no more to that.
That's great. It's great to provide a space. And you know, it all connects really nicely, but at the moment, none of that's at risk of becoming a high rise or any other use. So it's always going to remain some sort of green space for the thing, but do we use it for something else, you know, an extension of, you know, other recreational?
Yeah.
So, it's just thinking outside the square, but I think it's important to have a helicopter view as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, I was going to say, we seem to be going for a helicopter view or looking over the whole. Can we bring this back to a strategy meeting overall? So, because we seem to be going around in circles and not achieving anything.
Well,
Is that a fair comment or not?
well, Mr. Chair, I think we have been achieving.
We have, but we're slowly.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just thinking, is there anything else that you wanted to raise here at all?
We can just
Because
have a quick look if you guys want at the concept walk and cycle.
The last page.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So, next one. That one. So I guess if we talk about the west side, the town side, first of all. Okay, I guess the overall concept, we believe, is that we don't take enough bonus of the river. So what we're looking at is trying to have it set up so you can essentially go from top weir through to the bottom weir. Now, below the golf course and so forth, we don't have to formalise that with concrete paths or whatever. We can merely have that as a gravel through area and just run the slasher through. But I think part of the beauty of Emerald that we don't capture enough of is actually having that capacity to walk along the river. So that's what we're trying to gear that walk cycle pathway towards. Now, there's a dotted line on the northern side, that's where it comes up onto Lock Street. Lock Street has got a 2 metre wide path for a good percentage of the way. It narrows down towards the racecourse, and you've got a little narrow, if I use, might be best to use this one over here. No,
That's what we've got TV sets.
no, doesn't work.
So yeah.
This is a little narrow section here, but you've got a good long stretch right across the racecourse that's 2 metres wide. This part of Lock Street's all 2 metres wide. This is the end down to what we connect up to here. And again, we don't have to formalise it with concrete path at this stage, but the bottom weir coming back up past the cemetery, and you've got the BMX track here. We've already got this section of pathway existing. The transport plan shows the pathway coming through here, but most of this section isn't formalised in any way. So we're thinking of trying to make this the dedicated path that's already existing. And then we've got the pathway coming all the way through. This is behind Moreton Park. So we may have to bring that back out onto the road frontage side because it doesn't go all the way through there. It's rather steep there in some of the sections of the where the drain goes through.
Yeah.
But bringing it back out, we can link up where the easel is. There's already a pathway there coming around the Visitor Information Centre. And that's obviously that corridor through that we've just had discussion with over that land, the new street and the ancient land and so forth. We see it as, and it exists already, out to the showgrounds and to the TAFE College, formalising that part of the route. Similarly, it already exists to the TAFE College. There's a good wide pathway all the way. I guess this is the tanks that we've identified. The river all the way through. But then this one here will come through around the back of the Marist College. And we're looking at, that's the link across Presler's property. This is Cusack's. So you've got that natural low area coming through there. That's the water treatment plant around the back. Council already has that land there where the storage ponds, water storage ponds are. You're coming into the Rifle Range Nature Reserve. We've got plans, putting tracks and that through there. You've got those other storage, stormwater lagoons in here that will eventually come to council. You've got the GP Super Clinic block, and then coming all the way down Springshore Road and picking up the airport. And this is obviously Pilot Farm Road. The developer of Miranda Heights is already looking for council to take that section through the back of that estate there. So we've got the potential to extend that as that develops as well. So that was the thinking there, to try and formalise and get some consistency in our planning scheme and also with our transport network plan. To, if there's any other suggestions around that as to...
Just ask about the LN1, the opportunity for going around, past the Tate College, around the LN1 easement, back round.
Yeah. Can talk to Sunwater about it.
Yeah, I saw us asking Scott about it, but yeah, that's another opportunity through that area. Depends on other things.
Yeah.
So Mark, for the primary routes, they would be 2 metre wide concrete paths, and then the connector routes, what would you envisage? They would be like width-wise?
Depends on where they are and what they're linking up to. You have something like Rifle Range Road, ideally you'd want to make that, your 2 metres wide as well as main feeders, and then obviously a lot of the existing footpaths come back to about 1200. So that, you've got that range. Just out of interest, that section from the John Gay Bridge up to Vicky Peters Park, there's about 4 or 5 different widths of path through there, ranging from 1200 up to 2 metres, and just providing some consistency around some of those connections going forward.
And also looking at our primary routes and making sure that they're designed to be conducive to people using them, so they do have shade. And I suppose the Rifle Range Reserve, Rifle Range Raceway, that's why we have identified as a connector route, because there's not really much shade there at all at the moment. So whilst it does have the pathways in a lot of areas constructed, there's shady options to try and encourage people to be out and using.
So if you went on the east side route, there's about bit over 11 k's going around that one, and on the west side it's about 10 k's, 10.5 k's tied up there. So 2 decent routes if people want to jump on a bike or whatever and do a loop of town. It's quite a good ride, and also for your running groups and the like. But what we envisage trying to do is put a pamphlet together that can go to the Visitor Information Centre and have a defined route and have a consistency as to how it's marked, and like using little directional markers and having a distance on them as well.
I think that's a really good idea.
One of the other options to, Mark, if you could have a look at it for us, is to extend up through the back of, what is it, King Street? What's the name of the street that runs on? It's open drain all the way on the back.
John Street. John Street, is it? So extend John Street, maybe going north, up to the back of the state government building. So just come back down, see where that dog leg is? Keep going up, no, to your left. The dog leg, see where you turn sharp right there, yeah.
Yep.
But if you kept on going straight up the back of all those homes,
Yeah.
there's a nice little opportunity to put a detention basin up there and a little water feature. Then you go along LN1 as Charlie just said, and come back all the way through the tape and you look up the other end. So you have another loop there. That would be a really nice walk, and be a good nice eventual road through there, Mr. Mayor, you think, one day? Kerry?
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
They're talking about a road through there eventually in
Through
some
there.
banking, yeah, so, yeah. So eventually it should have, it's an opportunity for a road.
Was a heavy vehicle
Vehicle
access
bypass,
route
yeah.
proposed through that area, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Memory?
I think we own it, we own most of that land back at the Tate. We just about do anything we like in there, but that, up at the end of that John Street that's all drainage, it's just open drain, and it dead ends at the LM1. There's a bit of land at the right hand side there, you can turn it into parkland, it's back of the state government building. I don't know, we own it related, for sure. But it is a place where all of our stormwater drainage, even from low falls and there's a lot of water runs up there and you can pond it there. It's a nice little retention basin and it'll be a good place to start looking at desilting. That's the other thing we've got to start looking at all this stuff is that most of our stormwater goes into the river now directly, just engineer. And I think we've tried to do something at the golf course, pulling up a couple of places, but we've still got a lot of our stormwater drainage going directly into the creek, the river. We need to start to put some good ponding in and desilting places in. So, and we should tie that in together because they make good little, little bird places and watching places. Yeah.
To the chair, Mark, when you're crossing roads on those primary routes and connector routes, like what's the plan for the road crossings?
Again, at this point in time, we'd have to have discussions with our infrastructure friends, but obviously what the preference is to try and have a section in the middle where you can cross to one path, have a safety area in the middle and then cross the other rather than trying to cross the whole lot as one go. But again, what we're looking at is the concept. We haven't got into the actual, how do we design each individual component of it, because some of them are major roads we're crossing, some of them are less used, but where we've had to cross the highway and the like, we've obviously taken it to where the traffic lights and that are. There's already pedestrian crossings for that degree of safety, but yeah, certainly some of the feeder roads and that we'd have to have discussions.
Okay.
But providing coverage in the middle, safe cross areas would be the preference.
Okay, great.
Any other comments?
Great start, good start.
Mr. Chairman, could I suggest too that maybe we include in the minutes, and I'll talk to the team after this, just because we did really concentrate on the council aspirations that were on page 88 of the report. There were some suggested amendments raised by some of the members as well. To me, I suppose that just keeps our working group focused on, the direction from this council as well, from the committee as well. There was the first one, we were going to reword that, encourage all ages, but also in partnerships with development and also state bodies and peak bodies as well. Could I ask that we have a look at that, those aspiration points, and maybe get something back to members of the committee before the council meeting today, just to see if they're happy with that, and then I'd like to include them in the minutes, because that sort of just gives us some direction from today's meeting as well, because it really was just concentrating on where we were taking the review of the open space and rec, and also the Emerald Botanic Gardens model. Is everyone happy with that?
So as I recall in document 6, you want, whilst recognising council's role, we want to recognise the opportunity for joint ventures with private sector.
Yeah, partnerships with developers.
Right, and then at the bottom dot point, we want to recognise the state level more.
Yeah, that's it.
Practically. Councillor Bell, was any others there?
Well, it's just the top one, wasn't it, Councillor Bell, just instead of that word encourage, I think.
Yeah, I think
opportunities.
you had a word, didn't you?
Yeah, opportunities, providing opportunities.
Yeah, and that's what that's what I was thinking, Chair, if we could agree on those and give them to the committee just before the council meeting, and then we can incorporate them in the minutes. we did want to try and engage as much with the committee today on this, so it has taken a fair bit of time, but it has provided us some direction to go.
If the sailors are going to soggy, mate, I'm asking.
Through Mr. Chair, just before we get off this, I mean, I just see, I mean, it's the nice conclusion, which is great, John, but there's no reference there to resourcing or budget. Are we working within that, or do we need to look at, you know, something? I mean, if you're going to go forward with this, I wouldn't like to think it was tinkering around when you want to seriously get into this. I mean, do we need to have any budget considerations around that?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of just the plan or the gardens as well.
Well, any of it. Well, it's just, I think it's difficult to head off on one without, I think the danger here is to, and it's been done in the past, heading off in one without, and then other bits and pieces of it don't come along with it. And I think it's got to be holistic, or it loses a lot of value, I think.
Yeah, I think we will be presenting some budget adjustments,
Yeah.
budget review one.
Right,
We mentioned earlier the developer contribution reserve that's set aside for parkland. What we were looking at doing for the botanical gardens, the pathways, was to utilise some of that, but looking to attract grant funding to boost that. And that's the sort of direction we are looking at for the botanical gardens one. But obviously, you know, the big scale work that we're looking at, yes, we're going to need budget for that. And there's got to be recognition, if that's where we see ourselves heading, that we start doing the appropriate planning towards that once we identify our strategic direction.
And hopefully going forward then, I mean, a structure of contributions, and even in our commercial and industrial headworks contributions, that you want to see that
Yes.
with the master plan you can actually identify where those funds go to.
Yeah.
And the beauty of starting to get this document together is when we do go chasing funding, a lot of the planning starts to fall from the top down, and that is more and more what we're seeing is a requirement that, you know, they can show structured plan to where we've got to, rather than the haphazard type approach that we've used in the past. And that's what we're trying to avoid if possible.
Is there anything further, Jamie? No?
I'll just throw a red herring out there. Can we put a combined indoor basketball, netball stadium at Rundle Park? Leave you with that thought.
You can do anything.
Okay. Well, no further comments, councillors? So we'll break for.
Oh, Mr. Chair, could I just suggest, I'm sorry to do this, but I've just got Janice and Karen up the back there. This really is the last item about the grant funding round 2. And I'm just wondering if we could quickly do that before we break.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes, we'll get on to
Shouldn't
it.
take long.
Basically, there's this, and then there's a little bit of general business, and we're finished.
And we'll close sessions.
Okay, so Janice, please.
As you know, we have our community grants, and they're offered 2 rounds a year. We spoke briefly at the last standing committee about the new committee to review the grants. So in that process, the committee have met and recommended the community grants from the panel. So this get-go-round, we had 18 of the, I think it was 34 grants were presented and 18 were successful. So they're being presented to the standing committee today for endorsement of that recommendation to pay those community groups.
Any questions?
No, but just to add further comment, it was my first time being involved in that committee, and it's a very robust and thorough process, and I thoroughly enjoyed being involved. But it was a great opportunity to get an understanding of all the different clubs and their capabilities and manpower in the region. But what's really been great about this process, the way it's worked out, is there's really great a lot of projects across the region.
Yes.
So yeah, it's great how it's worked out. I think there's some really great projects that have been funded, and of course there was some that missed out, but yeah, I'm confident that it's a great representation of projects, and they represent good value for our region.
And the other interesting thing that's been happening over the years is the quality of the applications have started to improve, as you would have seen too, Megan, over time. So yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Melger, I ran into the Feather Club the other day at St John's Feather Club at Common. They'd taken their poultry down there to show it to him at that show, and they'd taken some of their cages and stuff there. And they're a great bunch, and I mean, this is, you know, communities building on communities and working with communities and stuff. So I just think these little grants are sort of so important, critical for us to encourage people to be able to, you know, increase their facilities or their opportunities to deliver more. But it really is good community building stuff, and yeah, I'm excited about, you know, about the diversity in which you know, the committee sort of was able to allocate the funding, but also just the you know, I think the amount of benefit that's going to be able to be provided by such, you know, very, very conservative small amount of money. It's great.
Okay.
I'm happy to move it.
Okay.
That's what you're after.
Yes. Second, Megan, Councillor Daniels. Okay, all those in favour? Unanimous. Okay, so we'll have a break for morning tea. Come back for general business and the closed session.